I just want to play you a clip. It's only 60 or 90 seconds. And I wanted to play for you this clip because one of the reporters asks him about, the financial decisions you're making in those first 100 days. Are they going to add to inflation? Are they going to be an issue for OCR rates? And then he doesn't answer the question. And then the second question is, give us something concrete. I want something concrete that you can show us as to why it won't add to inflation. And again, you might be surprised here, but Christopher Luxon can't find anything. What he starts talking about, and I think this is mentioned in the news story as well, like we've always said, they talk about, it's just like the 100-day plan has a thing about it's to initiate the first step towards. It's not actually 100. It's not actually 49 things. It's rubbing lots of things out. And it's things like, we're going to begin, we're going to start, we're going to hold. It's very, very kind of weak with any detail, as we've expected from National for the last 18 months. And this, again, I just wanted to show you one clip when he gets asked to specifically talk about it. Like he was asked, what specifically do you not like about the journalist? He couldn't come up with anything. Again, he doesn't come up with anything. I'll just play it for you.
Before since you become Prime Minister, you said, well, a lot of inflation is domestically generated. So prior to Christmas, what are the concrete things you're going to do?
Well, we've got 3 more cabinet meetings.
Now, remember with Luxon, he's already repeating himself. You know that for Luxon, that's a sign of him not knowing what to say. He's starting to list off cabinet meetings as one of the things you're going to do in a fiscal plan to not raise inflation. Sorry, I'll try not to interrupt.
A lot of inflation is domestically generated. So prior to Christmas, what are the concrete things you're going to do?
Well, we've got 3 more cabinet meetings. We've got a schedule outlined for the 4th, the 11th and the 18th. And one of those things is making sure that we are actually getting very intentional and we're driving the wasteful spending program and getting the wasteful spending out of the system. That is what we're committed to doing.
That's a meeting. But
no, it's not a meeting. No, it's not a meeting.
It's actually 3 meetings.
What are a couple of the things you're going to legislate or really drive?
Well, what we've talked about is that we're actually going to make sure the Reserve Bank has the single mandate. We'll make sure that fair pay awards, which are actually adding cost to businesses and therefore actually causing some suffering to businesses
I like it how he's now just blatant. It's suffering to businesses. Doesn't care about the suffering to the workers, but suffering to businesses.
It's not a good thing. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to make sure that we make progress on the 90-day trials, which we think actually creates more labour market flexibility. We're going to deal with resource management and repealing that act immediately.
So the concrete things that he is now listing is all the things from Labour that they're deleting. So he still hasn't actually said anything that they're going to implement or do at no point yet. He's talking about delete.
Before Christmas, so that we can actually free the country up to make investments that it needs to make in infrastructure. So it's a series of things, but be under no illusion, as you heard the Reserve Bank governor say today, and I met with him yesterday, it's very clear that we are united on a goal of going after inflation. He can only go so far if we don't have our fiscal situation sorted and under control. And that's why we need to go through government spending. We'll have a very big focus on that, which we will also kick off before Christmas as well.
Austerity.
So the last thing was we will have a look at the books. So meeting, delete, start looking at the books. They're the concrete things that National is going to do before Christmas to not affect inflation or the OCR rates. Concrete, Chewy. They're the concrete things. So
he is not very good at this. Look, he could have just gone austerity. We're rolling out so much austerity you wouldn't even know. Yeah, we know it hasn't worked overseas, but business are hurting. Business is suffering. The cost of living crisis is out the fucking window. Cost of living crisis, that's about people. That's about everybody and their shopping bills and their mortgage and that sort of thing. We're not worried about that anymore. The election's over. We won. We don't have to talk about you proles anymore. We're just talking to our base now, the guys that have paid our money. Business is suffering horribly, tortured. Yeah. Very, very cruel what business is going through at the moment. We definitely need to do what Daddy Business wants us to do. Join a goddamn union.
Yeah, that's going to be your catchphrase. That's the first, the first t-shirt back for 2024.
Yeah.
We're going to now just roll into the news story about the first 100 days. And also there is some stuff obviously about Winston in here, but this will be the last thing we look at for today. So this is one news from tonight talking through the 100-day plan. And actually, I've been telling you guys for weeks now, because not many people are aware that there's no New Zealand funding, journalistic fund or anything for the news hours. And Simon actually breaks that down a little bit in this for a bit of information for us all. So let's have a look at that story.
Christopher Luxon is aiming to hit the ground running, hoping to achieve 49 goals in his government's first 100 days. But the Prime Minister, holding his first press conference after meeting his cabinet, couldn't escape questions about his deputy Winston Peters and his media attacks. Here's senior political reporter Benedict Collins.
Good afternoon, everyone.
It was Christopher Luxon's first post-cabinet press conference, and our new Prime Minister sure was keen to get down to business.
Because today I'm outlining our work plan for this coalition government's first 100 days in office.
That plan, killing off lots of the previous government's policies.
Yep, my plan is to get out the eraser.
We will repeal Auckland's regional fuel tax, the ute tax and Three Waters. We will dispense with blanket speed limit restrictions and stop Auckland's light rail, and let's get Wellington moving.
But the topic soon turned to his deputy, Winston Peters, who's been accusing the media of taking bribes this week.
I mean, Winston's allowed to make his remarks in the way that he chooses. He may not express it in the way.
Even the tone. I mean, what am I supposed to do? He's older than me and he's been in the house a bit more. I mean, like, fair enough, the comment before about Hipkins having, all bark but no bite. But what's the I mean, God, what do we say?
That I do it. But honestly, we have serious challenges in this country and we are focused on those things.
Mr. Peters believes the government's public interest journalism fund compromised the media.
He doesn't believe that. He is playing to a base. He signed up to it. He is one of the people who brought it on board when he was the deputy prime minister under the last government or two governments ago. So he doesn't believe that. He's saying that to get the ear of a certain group of people.
Media's independence.
So, Daniel, you cannot defend $55 million of bribery. Get it very clear.
He even upstaged the PM at his first cabinet meeting yesterday.
Before you ask one more question, tell the public what you signed up to get the money.
But Christopher Luxon doesn't like the fund either.
Well, for the very reason that it actually leads to perceptions of bias, rightly or wrongly. I just say to you, that's the perception. Whether that's real or not doesn't really matter.
This has been a pretty messy start.
So that's even one step further. He's actually saying it doesn't matter whether the perception is right or wrong. Now, I said to you guys last night, we need to have a long memory because this is the yardstick they've just put out. It doesn't matter if a perception is right or wrong. That's enough to be making these decisions on. So we need to remember that when we come up with a perceived, perception on something that they're doing, because in this instance, it doesn't matter whether they're right or wrong. They're going to make the policy change anyway.
To your new government, isn't it? With public health officials appalled about the smoke-free changes that you're making, with your deputy prime minister making these bribery allegations.
I disagree completely. I think we actually have formed a coalition government. It'll be different from what you've seen before because we've got three parties involved. We've got a range of personalities involved.
Chris Hipkins says, I told you so.
I was concerned that a national New Zealand First Act government would be a coalition of chaos. I wasn't quite expecting them to prove it so spectacularly so soon.
But some who know Winston Peters say there's a method to his madness.
What he's getting to is his own supporters who would hold those sort of conspiratorial negative views. He's reassuring them that if they didn't get everything they wanted in the coalition agreement, they've certainly got him there speaking up for their viewpoint.
But he says Mr. Peters' behaviour could pose a problem for the Prime Minister.
But in the longer term, if this continues, he can't afford to be seen as just a sort of a bystander. He is the head of government. Mr. Peters is his deputy.
Something Christopher Luxon is probably well aware of. Benedict Collins, One News.
All right, just before we bring in Benedict live, let's take a closer look at the fund the Deputy Prime Minister has issues with. Created in 2020, the Public Interest Journalism Fund was $55 million over 3 years. It aimed to shore up public interest media as the pandemic hit and advertising disappeared.
So like I've been saying, it saved a bunch of outlets, especially small ones. Like they were talking about the Greymouth Mail, I think, today, because they had no advertising dollars coming in and everyone would have lost their jobs at the end of the pandemic. We would have had 10% of our media left.
By New Zealand On Air, organisations had to show that what they wanted to do would be at risk without the funding. Criteria included a commitment to the treaty, but NZ On Air says those criteria weren't absolute and it turned nobody down over the treaty clause. Names you'd recognise received funds. RNZ, Stuff, NZME and Discovery New Zealand, alongside many smaller players such as The Spin-Off and Farmers Weekly. TVNZ...
Farmers, hang on. Farmers hate Jacinda. Farmers applied to get money from the Public Interest Journalism Fund. What's going on here? What's going on?
Received funding for Q&A with Jack Tame, made clear in each program and previously already funded by New Zealand On Air. It also went to children's show News to Me. Not funded this program, One News, or any of the other news and current affairs programs made by TVNZ. All right, let's bring in senior political reporter Benedict Collins. What's New Zealand On Air had to say about all of this, Benedict?
Well, of course, one of New Zealand On Air's board members actually resigned yesterday after returning fire at Winston Peters. On social media, they basically accused Mr. Peters of being a liar, of being malicious, and in the pocket of big tobacco. So they're now gone. But in a much more sober statement from New Zealand On Air today, they told us that newsrooms always had complete editorial independence. They said they'd funded around 92,000 pieces of content, and they said there's not ever been one complaint that has been upheld around bias in relation to all this funding. And they also said no one who received the funding has ever complained about being muzzled.
A busy few days, not quite the start the new government would have wanted for their first week.
No, I mean, they've got off to a bit of a shocker, haven't they? I mean, they've been furiously criticised over these smoke-free changes that they've made by public health officials. And it's not a great look when your brand new health minister is effectively parroting lines from the tobacco industry. And they've also got now Winston Peters, kicking off. They're having to deal with that. Not great. But from National's perspective, as one National Party insider told me today, it's not like any of their ministers have crashed their car and been taken down to the cop shop. So they're keeping this early turbulence in perspective.
There you go,
What
Joey.
the fuck was that last comment? Holy shit.
Well, but the difference is obviously the personal issues and what Kerry Allen got up to is one thing, affects her personally and her life. The stuff they're planning on bringing in is going to affect tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands of people in a negative way. So, they think that's like for like. But there you go, Joey.
It's a bit of a shocker, isn't it? In the same way that me dropping a pot of food in the kitchen is a bit of a clumsy whoopsie doodle. No, it's the sign of three parties who are not prepared to do the job, led by one of the most inept, inexperienced politicians that we've ever had to deal with. He is not good at this. He can't control a stable of idiots, and none of them are across any of the things that they need to be across. So all they've got is slash and burn before Christmas. Fuck you, get out of the public sector. And I hadn't heard, that's the first time I've heard that they have cancelled Let's Get Wellington Moving. That is decades of work, hundreds and millions of dollars of work into decongesting Wellington. The light rail in Auckland is gone. So any chance of Auckland joining every other first world developed major city in this on this planet and having actual functional public transport, that's gone. So there you go. Decades of congestion there. It's just stunning to me that they talk about wasteful government spending and they flush hundreds of billions of dollars of work down the toilet.